and welcome to this online session talking about the TPP campaign. We're just going to wait a couple minutes for more folks to join. It looks like there's still more people signing on as we go. So we're going to give about 5 more minutes for folks to join, and then we'll get started. Maybe we can just do a quick introduction of who's here. So I'm Jolin. I'm an organizer with Leadnow from Toronto, and I'm here with Fatin. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, my name is Fatin, and I am the TPP organizer for the fall. Yeah.
We'll say more about who we are and about the campaign, of course, in a few minutes. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to join. It's cool. We can see the numbers ticking up. It looks like there's people joining, and the numbers keep growing. So that's really exciting. For folks that are just signing on now, we're going to get started in a couple minutes, just waiting as more folks join here. All right. So welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. It looks like there's still more people joining, but they'll have to jump on midway through. So we're going to start with a quick kind of welcome introduction to who we are and what we're planning to do today, and then we'll get into it. For those of you that weren't there when I introduced myself earlier, my name is Jolin, and I'm an organizer with Leadnow. I was thinking that it was basically, well, a little more than a year ago, I was working on Leadnow's Vote Together election campaign, doing some similar webinars like this one and organizing across the country. And it really gave me, when I was thinking back to kind of how that felt, it really made me feel optimistic about what we're going to be able to accomplish together in the campaign to stop the TPP, because we really saw, with the election campaign, just the power of people in the Leadnow community across the country coming together. And so I'm really excited to be here with you and to be talking about how we can have a people-powered campaign to stop the TPP. I'll pass it over to Fatin to introduce himself, and then I'll go through some kind of logistics for how things are going to work today. Over to you, Fatin.
Hey everyone, my name is Fatin. I've joined the Leadnow team as the TPP organizer for this fall. I've been active as a climate justice activist and also a photojournalist for the last few years. So I've been documenting things that have been happening at the UN with the climate change conferences, and also documenting the climate movement in Canada. And I'm also from Bangladesh, and I was born there, and I moved to Canada when I was 10. So I've been following a lot of how corporations are playing a role in Bangladesh and other countries in the global south. And I think the abuse of corporate power in these countries is something that we really need to look at. And I'm excited to work with all of you guys to send a clear message to Trudeau and the government. This TPP deal is not a good idea.
Cool. So just quickly how things will work today. We're going to take you through a little bit of the context for this campaign and the plan for scaling up our campaign this fall. And we'll leave time for questions at the end. And there's 2 ways that you can ask a question. You can use the Twitter hashtag Reject TPP. So ask your question via Twitter, tag it with the hashtag Reject TPP, and then Brittany Smith, our TPP campaigner, is behind the scenes kind of collecting all the questions submitted that way so that we can answer them, as many of them as we have time for. And the other way that you can ask questions, if you're not a Twitter user, is through email, by sending a question to the email address questions@leadnow.ca. So both of those options for submitting questions should be on your screen if you want to just kind of ask questions as you go, we'll be taking some time at the end to go through the questions that have come in and answering, like I said, as many of them as we can. So we're really excited for this, and with that, I'm going to load up. We have a presentation here, so if you just give me a sec, I'll get it up on the screen for you. All right. So I'll pass it over to you, Fatin, to take it away, and I'll click through the slides for you.
Cool, thanks. So, like as you can all see, we can see a map of Canada here, and what's really cool is all those dots actually represent you guys here today. So we can see about 500 people RSVP'd across Canada, and it's really cool that we're able to connect, coast to coast to talk about the TPP today. And one of the main messages that we're driving with this campaign is that this is about people power, not corporate power. And that this is not just a trade deal. The TPP is about 6,000 pages long. I'm getting like feedback. Can you hear me, Jolan?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll maybe go on to the next slide. Okay, cool. So yeah, just to continue, the TPP is not just a trade deal. It's about 6,000 pages long, but only a fraction of it is about tariffs, quotas, or any of the other things that we usually think about in a trade deal. Even Stiglitz has said, who is a famous economist, that the TPP is not about free trade. This is about changing the rules of the game for the market economy in ways that disadvantage ordinary people and advantage a few large corporations. And one of the things that is really concerning is is like how corporate power is distorting our democracy. I think like the ISDS, which is the investor state dispute settlement process, is one of the scariest parts of the deal, where corporations are able to sue any government in Canada that passes a law that the corporation thinks would affect future profits. And we should know that Canada is already the country that has been most sued under the ISDS process. One of the examples include Lone Pine Resources, which is a fracking company that's suing Quebec for $250 million. And the problem is that these are private tribunals that are overseen by corporate lawyers with direct connections to the companies they're supposed to be judging. So there's really no way for us as the public to engage in this process meaningfully and to have any influence in the decisions that are being made. And basically the fact is that it's stacked in favor of the corporations. And in most cases, we never learn how much money our government hands over to corporations. And for example, Ontario was designing their climate plan where they proposed to buy local provisions to ensure that new green jobs would have been created in Ontario. But US companies have threatened to sue, and the government took out the buy local provisions. Now there are US companies in the market, and ironically, one of them is now suing Ontario for $28 million for a law that they don't like. So I think what we can see is that if the TPP passes, it'll open us up to more lawsuits in the future. And looking at what's happening in Standing Rock with the North Dakota Access Pipeline and indigenous communities across North America and their fight against the tar sands expansion, indigenous rights are greatly at risk. And that's another area of focus for us through the TPP campaign that we really want to highlight, where indigenous rights and their legitimate access to natural resources are not going to be defended in the TPP. So basically, the TPP would allow for multinational corporations to extract resources without following FPIC, which is the free, prior, and informed consent, which is like a key tenet of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And corporations could sue governments in Canada for protecting Indigenous rights. And one of the examples that's very recent is the LNG terminal on Leilu Island, where Petronas, where like indigenous land defenders are now protesting the company Petronas. And if the TPP did go into effect, Petronas, which is a Malaysian company, could so the Malaysian government could sue Canada for delaying or rejecting the proposal, if First Nations communities in Canada continue to protest. That's like one example of how the TPP could, if in effect, could affect us in Canada as well. So the next slide that we're looking at is actually a quote from Brenda Sayers, who said, if multinational corporations are able to sue national governments in private tribunals for a loss of potential profits, what incentive is there to obtain the consent of Indigenous communities? And I think we need to really reflect on that and understand that First Nations communities and Indigenous communities and their rights must be protected, and that we have a role as Canadians to ensure that. And the TPP deal, rejecting the TPP deal, is one of the key ways we can achieve that goal. So the next slide is another reason for why the TPP trade deal is not a good idea. Is like TPP could cost 58,000 jobs in Canada. And all of this for almost no economic growth. Another reason would be to look at the increased cost of prescription drugs. The TPP would extend patent terms to brand name pharmaceutical companies, which would increase the cost of medicine in Canada by $636 million a year. Another reason why people are upset about the TPP deal is that there could be more online spying, which would restrict the ability of governments to establish safeguards over sensitive information such as financial and health data. It could make your private information accessible in countries with weak oversight or privacy protections, like the US with its broad surveillance powers under the and also it could give internet service providers more power to monitor and report your online activity. So all of this to say is that, this is bad for us, but it's also bad for people everywhere. It's important to be clear that, it is not just something that's only going to affect us. It's going to affect communities in the global south. It's going to affect racialized communities. It's going to affect Indigenous communities. And, one of the examples is like Canadian mining companies are notorious for human rights abuses and environmentally damaging practices. Just today, there was a report that was released by a professor at Osgood Law School documenting how Canadian companies are complicit in mining abuses in Latin America. So I think, if the TPP passes, Canadian mining industry can sue governments in places like Chile if they try to protect their environmental or human rights. And I think we hold a level of privilege as Canadians to make sure that we're also standing up for people in other parts of the world who are unable to defend themselves. So I'm going to hand it off to Joel now, who's going to talk to you a bit about what we've been doing so far at Leadnow.
Thanks, Bettine. So Leadnow has been running the TPP campaign for a while. We launched in January, and that was when right before the signing ceremony for the TPP. So for folks that aren't following it so closely, there's kind of two stages. So the first stage is signing the deal, and that happened in February, but it doesn't actually come into effect until countries like Canada ratify the deal. So that's sort of the second stage. So in advance of the signing ceremony, we launched a online action that thousands and thousands of people took, sending messages to the government, urging them not to support the TPP. And we also took out ads in the Hill Times paper in Ottawa. And then we even followed our government all the way to New Zealand, where the signing ceremony was happening. And in the left-hand photo, what you'll see is a billboard that your donations helped to pay for in New Zealand, to let the government know when they were in New Zealand that that there was a lot of opposition to the TPP. We knew that it was likely that they would sign the deal anyways, but our objective was really to get the government to commit well, first get the government to clarify that by signing the deal, they weren't guaranteeing that they would support it through ratification. And then we also wanted them to commit to robust public consultations. And so what happened was Chrystia Freeland, the trade minister, did sign the TPP in February, but she, in all of her statements to the media with respect to the signing the TPP, she was very clear that that the government hadn't made up their mind yet if they were going to ratify the deal, and that they would first consult with people across Canada before making that decision. So then the hearings, the public hearings started with cities across the country having hearings. We organized Leadnow members to attend the hearings and speak out against the TPP, and then also we worked with allies to organize demonstrations outside the hearings. One of the things that we were trying to highlight, this is a picture of the demonstration in Richmond, just outside Vancouver. We really wanted to highlight that we didn't think that the public consultation was adequate. When they first announced the public hearings, there was no opportunity for the public to actually speak. So you had to sort of request access, and most of the people that requested access to speaking to the panel were actually denied. So we held this protest, which generated a lot of media attention, helped us to get the story out there that the government's consultation process was inadequate. And ultimately, through the pressure of the Leadnow community, the government eventually sort of changed their plans, and for the future, for the consultation events that happened in the sort of next round of public hearings, they actually added in a component where members of the public were free to actually voice their concerns about the TPP. So it was a small victory, but we did see a people-powered victory in opening up the consultations to public participation. We had volunteers at the Liberal Party convention in Winnipeg, handing out flyers to Liberal delegates, highlighting the conflicts between the TPP and the promises that the Liberals made in their election campaign. And part of what the strategy was here is really taking into account the fact that there's lots of people who identify with the Liberal Party who either have concerns about the TPP or haven't heard much about it, and when they do learn the details of what the TPP actually would mean, there's lots of Liberals that are opposed. But at the same time, we weren't the only ones that were working on this. Behind the scenes, there's an army of corporate lobbyists, and we pulled the numbers, and it's kind of staggering how many lobbyists are meeting with the government talking about international trade. There's 2,392 recorded communications from lobbyists to the government on international trade just since the election. So if you think about that number, that's more than 6 communications per day, including weekends, just about international trade. And unfortunately, we're starting to hear that the Liberals seem to be edging towards publicly supporting the TPP. This is a headline from the National Post earlier in the month, and then actually right before we started this webinar, I was reading an article where Trudeau was hinting that it's likely that that his party will support the TPP. So this is a huge concern. And what I also want to stress is that this fall is going to be really important. So in the States, if you've been following the US election, you might have noticed that both Secretary Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are speaking out in opposition to the TPP. But we need to make no mistake that that does not mean that the TPP won't pass in the States. Right now, there's a bunch of powerful politicians backed by huge amounts of corporate money who are working on an sort of an end run to get around the opposition from Clinton and Trump and push the TPP through what's called the lame duck session. So the session of US government that happens after the election, but before the new president is sworn in. There's Republican and Democrat politicians that are working to push TPP through in that lame duck session. And so that's basically what we're looking at that as the highest risk point for the TPP going forward. If it does pass in the US, which it very much could, Trudeau is going to come under intense pressure to follow suit and ratify the TPP. The other piece of context that's important to note is about the CETA deal, which is a trade deal kind of similar to TPP, but this time with members of the European Union. It's kind of inspiring, actually. It looks like through people-powered opposition and one courageous government, the CETA deal appears to be unraveling. And what that's going to mean if the deal does get delayed or ultimately killed is that the multinational corporations are going to double down on pressuring the government to ratify the TPP, because if they lose CETA, they're going to really need TPP as a mechanism for maintaining their power. So all of that leads us to where we are now, talking about what it is that we can do now to stop the TPP. So I'm going to pitch back to Fatin to take us through a little bit of the context and strategy for what's coming up next.
Yeah, thanks, Jolan. So yeah, I think like the next part of our conversation is about how do we actually stop the TPP together, right? So what can we do to get the government from giving into corporate pressure and going ahead and ratifying the deal? One of the things that we're going to really try to leverage is that we know that the liberal base is split on the TPP. There is a group that is very pro-trade corporate wing of the party, and then there's also a more progressive wing that has serious concerns about the TPP, and many of you may be here today in this webinar. So the progressive wing of the party clearly sees the TPP as an unusually bad trade deal. Even the trade minister herself has been said to like privately bring up concerns about it. And the other another like observation or to note is that there are a lot of high-profile opposition from constituencies that the liberals care a lot about, such as the tech industry. So Jim Balsay, who's the founder of BlackBerry, is one of the has been very vocal about his opposition to the trade deal. And you know what this image is kind of showing is that I think the corporate wing of the party seems to be gathering ground, and they've been doing a lot of fierce lobbying to get the TPP signed and moving it forward towards the ratification process. But I think that where we have the opportunity is that there's a massive show of people who are trying to tip the scale back towards the people. And I think that's what this movement is really about, is about us coming together and really challenging these corporate lobbyists and letting them know that we have more power than them. And I think that the liberals also need to be made aware that they won their majority by appealing to progressive voters. And that's how they picked up a lot of the NDP votes and also attracting new voters. And I think that they need to maintain the trust of these voters, many of you who are here today, if they're going to stay in power. And that if the TPP deal moves ahead, that they could potentially lose support in the upcoming election. So how are we going to actually, you know, like how is this campaign going to work, and what are we going to be focusing on? Our strength is really like, I think that there has been already a lot of opposition over the course of the year, but now it's time to come together, and it's time to show the strength and diversity of the opposition that exists, and to let them know what the TPP will cost them if they do ratify it. And this is what our plan is looking at. It's looking at a massive social media campaign. It's going to be one of the ways that we're going to be engaging a lot of new supporters. And we're going to be engaging a lot of folks. So like hashtag Reject TPP, and doing a lot of like photo and multimedia content to make sure that people who don't know about the TPP, who haven't been tuned into the conversations around the trade deal, are made aware. And I think that all of you play a critical role in that, in not only having these dialogues online, but also taking it offline and also talking to it with your family members, with your neighbors, with folks who you're working with, to let them know what the TPP is about. And we want to inject these new voices into the conversation. We want to show, we'll be bringing in a lot of new voices and highlighting voices of folks who are impacted by the TPP, and also help guide the media to these voices which are not usually heard in conversations around the trade deal. And I think like we need to really personalize and contextualize how the TPP deal could, for example, affect indigenous communities, how it could threaten their livelihoods and their traditional living practices. And I think that that's where we hold a lot of power. And finally, this is where all of you are critical, is we need to get out onto the streets. We need to make noise. We need to show that people power is going to win, not corporate power. And we need to shift the political calculus for the liberals. This is the most important thing, and we need your help doing this, because this is a people powered campaign. We need to talk about jobs, how jobs are going to be affected, how workers are going to be affected, along with indigenous communities and other groups who are, who are at risk with this trade deal being pushed through. Yeah, hand it off to Joel now.
Just getting my microphone unmuted. When we're talking about people power, I thought this would be a good image to show. So this is protests in Germany around trade deals, the CETA deal, which we talked about earlier, and TTIP, which is a deal with EU and the United States. There was unprecedented protests against trade, and all across the world we're seeing this like sentiment of people realizing that these trade deals aren't good for people anywhere, they're only good for corporations. And why I included that here is because it seems like this people-powered movement in Europe has been successful at derailing the CETA deal. If you've been following the news, you'll have heard that a small region in Belgium called Wallonia has refused to give their consent to the TPP, and that has derailed they'd been planning to sign the TPP this week, or sorry, that's planning to sign the CETA this week, but it's totally unraveled. And that wouldn't have been possible for that government to stand strong if they didn't know that there was literally millions of people across the continent standing behind them. So people power really does work. Sometimes it's easy for us to feel small against the forces of corporate power, but I just wanted to start here by reminding us that when we come together and work for a common cause, we can win against corporate power. So now let's talk specifics. So first, I wanted to tell you kind of a larger context. So we're working with allies from different organizations, like groups in labor and other sort of social movement organizing groups. And it sounds like there's sort of convergence around November as a month of action to stop the TPP. And there's already a few events confirmed that we know about. So if anyone here is watching from Vancouver, there's going to be a rally on November 30th. And then there's a few dates that are just getting confirmed for events in Quebec and a couple other places. So we're working with coalition partners to try and really make November a month where people are getting out in the streets and showing visible opposition to the TPP. We're focusing on one date, November 23rd, where we're going to be working with you, hopefully, and people across the country to organize Reject TPP actions, where we'll go to MP offices and deliver stacks and stacks of petitions to them so that they get the opposition literally right to their doorstep. The goals of the petition deliveries, we want to put pressure directly on MPs and force them to confront how much opposition there is in their community and across the country. We want to build movement energy. So I think one of the things that we know we're going to need is just to keep growing our people power, and having events and rallies across the country can really help to invigorate the movement and grow the movement by showing people that there's other people like them in their community who have concerns about the trade deal. And then the third one, which is really important, is generating local media coverage. So we know that that the Liberal government cares a lot. They care about national media for sure, but also what they really care about is local media stories in the ridings where their MPs are. And so if we can generate local media, it's something that can really have an influence on both the national conversation, but also something that the government is watching very closely. These are some pictures from a petition delivery action that we did when Stephen Harper was trying to push through the Unfair Elections Act. And I'm including it here just because I think it really is a testament to the power of this tactic, getting out in the streets, joining with friends and neighbors, and delivering the voices of opposition right to the MP's doorsteps. So there's a few pictures here, and what you'll notice is that these actions can look a lot different depending on the community that they're being organized in. So in the top left, you see the action that was organized in Vancouver. It was quite a big demonstration. There was over 100 people and great signs and banners. Clearly a lot of folks participating in it. It was a successful event, but then also below it, you'll see a much smaller event. I believe this is, I don't remember which community this was in, but in some of the smaller rural communities, the events obviously weren't as big, right? Because they're in smaller towns. But what we noticed is that that they were still effective in getting the media to pay attention, getting media stories in the local media, and helping to create this feeling of national momentum across the country. So whether you live in a big city or a small town, there's a way that a petition delivery in your community can be part of this like national push to shift the conversation on the TPP. So we're looking at this stage for people who will sign up to help to organize a petition delivery locally. We want to have as many of them across the country as we can. The power of this tactic is really in numbers. So if there's just one, it's going to make a difference. But if there's dozens of them, that's going to really get the government's attention. So I want to ask you if you'll consider stepping up to help lead a petition delivery in your community. And what that looks like is it can be pretty simple. Again, it sort of depends. The scale of the action will depend a little bit on your context and how much time you have, how big your community is, things like that. But the basics are inviting your friends and family to attend on November 23rd. We'll give you a file that has all of the names of people that have signed the Reject TPP petition. So you'll print that out so it's ready to deliver to your MP's office. You'll want to make a few signs and banners, some visuals for the photos. Tipping off the local media is an important part because, like we said, they're going to be very interested in covering this event. And it's one of the ways that we can really make the government pay attention. And then, of course, on the day of, just getting there early to welcome people to the event and to help go inside and deliver the petition to your MP's office and getting photos and things like that so that we can share them on social media. So it really can be quite simple. It's as simple as that, and it makes a huge impact. We're going to be here to support you every step of the way. So you'll get a step-by-step guide with instructions on how to host a petition delivery in your community. We'll help to invite other Leadnow members who live in your community to attend your event. So that's nice because it's a chance to meet other Leadnow supporters that live in your area that you might not have met. And then we'll also be available sort of on call to provide one-on-one support over the phone if there's particular challenges or questions that you have that come up. So I really hope that you will consider signing up to lead a petition delivery. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with information about how you can sign up. So you can sort of sleep on it tonight and then look for that email tomorrow. It'll be a short survey, just confirming a few details, and then you'll get a phone call from one of our organizers to kind of walk through the next steps with you. So really think about that. We've had people step up and do this who later told us that they had never organized anything in their life, and then they decided to organize a petition delivery and said that they had a lot of fun and felt like they made a real impact. So it is something that literally anyone can do. So I hope you'll consider that. If that's not something that you can do at this time, another way you can help is by chipping in financially to help provide the resources that we need to be able to provide that support to people organizing for all the printing costs and various things that go into something like this. And then the third thing, Fatine mentioned earlier, how some of the work we're trying to do is highlighting stories of folks that are impacted by the TPP, folks that are opposed to the TPP. We're going to be doing a lot of work to push out stories through social media and different channels like that. And so if you have a story that you think might be interesting to share, you can send it to Fatine at Leadnow.ca. That's his email address. And I'll just pitch quickly, Fatine, is there anything else you want to add about that piece?
Yeah, I think just like the point that like there's two ways of looking at it. One is, is this a story that you want to share because you're from an impacted community that could potentially be affected if the TPP deal is ratified? Another way of looking at it is to your story about why you are rejecting the TPP deal can connect to a broader audience, and let other people understand why they should also care about it too. So there's two ways of looking at it, and if you're interested, then yeah, shoot me an email at fatin@leadnow.ca, and we can talk further about how we can get some of these stories heard in other communities as well.
Awesome. So that's sort of the end of our presentation. I'm going to figure out how to turn off my screen sharing so that we should be able to see. Hopefully you can see me again. And now we're going to take some questions. So just to reiterate, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, there are two ways that you can submit it. The first is to send an email to questions@leadnow.ca. And the second way that you can ask a question is to submit it by Twitter with the hashtag Reject TPP. So I think we've already got a few questions lined up here, and Matthew Carroll, who is our Director of Engagement, has just jumped on, and he's going to be helping to get the questions that are coming in and ask them to us. Matthew, you seem to be muted. We've been having some tech challenges here, so thanks, folks. Fatin, can you hear Matthew?
I can't, no.
No. Okay, well, I can see some of the questions coming in, so maybe I'll try and ask us the first one here, and then Matthew, if you want to play with your headphones or microphone or whatever it is. So the first one that came in was, is Leadnow organizing any public demonstrations? And if so, in which locations? I think we mostly answered that. So we want to organize petition deliveries in as many communities as we can. And a part of how many we can do depends on how many of you step up. So I really hope that you will consider doing that. I think one thing I'll just add on here, there's a couple places where there's already events being organized by allies. And so we're not actually going to be organizing events where there's already another group that's taking the lead. So Vancouver, I mentioned, has an event on November 30th. And then I believe that there's a couple, I think potentially it's either like Windsor or one of those communities in Southern Ontario. There's an event that's about to be confirmed. But in any case, where people sign up to lead an event in a community and we know that there's already another group that's organizing something there, we'll just do our best to connect our Leadnow folks with the organizers of the event that's already planned. Okay, so it looks like Matthew is still trying to sort out his tech challenges. So we're going to just keep going this way. There's a question here from Uli that says, aren't TPP and the Paris Climate Accord mutually exclusive because of the ISDS clause? So for folks that are maybe not following the climate stuff as closely, Trudeau has committed to 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling for global warming. And what climate scientists are saying is that basically means that we have to really rapidly scale down carbon emissions and probably can't build any new pipelines or infrastructure like that. I have some thoughts on this question. I wanted to pitch to you, Fatin, because I know you kind of come from a climate background. Is there anything you want to say with kind of the conflicts between TPP and the Paris climate commitments?
Yeah, I think like the 1.5 degrees Celsius target is already like, we're already on track to overshoot that with like, different like infrastructure developments around tar sands that's underway. The TPP, like there has been a number of reports and like scholars that have been discussing this link and asserted that if Canada is serious about maintaining the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, that the TPP deal would rapidly overshoot overshoot like the carbon emissions that we are supposed to kind of keep under wraps. So we can, like, over the course of the campaign, we will also be connecting, like linking, how climate impacts are related to the TPP, and making that link much more clearer. And for those of you who are following the UNFCCC, like climate change conferences and negotiations, starting November 7th, actually the COP22 is going to be taking place in Morocco. So it's actually happening at an interesting time where, the TPP deal, is like there's uncertainty around whether the TPP deal will be ratified, and also the negotiations process is going on. So I think there's another opportunity for us to really, like, on an international platform, let Trudeau know that this is not something that he can commit to, and basically that the meeting the Paris climate commitments would be extremely difficult if fossil fuel companies could challenge decisions to take action on reducing emissions. So if Canada is trying to reduce emissions, which is in conflict with fossil fuel corporations that are trying to maintain their profit and keep their profit, this is the deal could provide a gateway or paths for them to challenge, like, governments that are actually trying to reduce their carbon emissions. Which means, like, the transition to, like, a renewable economy is actually would be affected adversely if the TPP deal goes ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, so you can think about many projects in Canada, whether it's the tar sands, any of the pipelines, fracking, all of those things basically can't go forward if we're going to hit our targets for greenhouse gas reductions. And like Fatin is saying, like, corporations can in many cases sue the government if they do the right thing in those cases. Matthew, do you want to try your mic again?
Yeah, let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Hooray.
Great, okay. Sorry about that, folks. We've had a couple of tech challenges today, and also just wanted to give a shout out to Britt, who's should have been here and wanted to be here. She's done a lot of work on this campaign, so it's a real shame that she couldn't be here on the live stream to answer some of the questions as well. So the next question comes from Scott, who emailed asking, will you discuss the permanency of the TPP? I'll push that one back to you, John.
Yeah, and I wish Britt, maybe Britt, if you have the specifics on it, that would be helpful. I know that trade deals typically are not super easy to get out of. For example, with the Canada-China FIPA that Harper ratified, it's something like 31 years, so it could be a really long time. Britt she's amazing. She's behind the scenes, she's listening, and she just texted me the answer to the question. She said, unlike other investment deals, there's no expiration date, no date for renegotiation. So it could only be altered by a consensus of all signatories. So that's basically saying that, like, unless all the signatory nations, so there's 12 nations, unless all 12 commit to renegotiating, it's actually impossible to change it. So that is terrifying.
Great, thanks, Jolan. And the next question, which also comes from Scott, I'm not sure if it's the same Scott or a different Scott, can you help explain why Trudeau is leaning towards thwarting the TPP? Fatin, would you take a stab at that one?
Do you want to take that one, Fatin, or do you want me to grab it?
Tech problems continue. Looks like we might have lost 15 there, so maybe John, you can go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that it goes back to what Fatin was talking about, how the Liberal Party is facing a lot of pressure from corporate lobbyists, and I think that the Liberals identify as a free trade party. They've said that in kind of different speeches and campaigning, that trade is something that they support. I think what's concerning is that, like, the vast majority of the 6,000 pages that make up the TPP deal aren't actually even about trade, right? And so I think that, like, they're supporting it because they don't want to be they don't want to kind of, like, lose the support of their corporate backers that do support the Liberal Party, and the kind of the corporate wing of the party like wants this deal, and also they sort of are trying to maintain this image that they're a party that supports free trade, and so I think part of what we need to do is really be clear when we're talking about the TPP that it's not a trade deal like other trade deals that have come before. It includes pages and pages and pages of things that have nothing to do with trade and everything to do with solidifying corporate power. There's a lot of people who would say that they support free trade, but actually oppose the TPP because there's so many things that aren't even related to trade in the text of the TPP. So I think like kind of the main pieces is it's that piece about the image of trying to present themselves as a free trade, pro-trade party, and then the immense pressure that they're getting from corporate lobbyists.
Thanks, John. And a question from Leah by email. Can you notify the Canadian population that TPP will undermine any and all efforts to effectively address climate change? I think we might have had that one. There was another question around climate.
Yeah, we talked. I think what I'll say, like, so this question is about kind of like spreading the word about the impacts of the TPP on climate, and I think that actually is a really important thing to be thinking about. We're going to do what we can. So Fatine mentioned the social media advertising that we're going to be doing to try and spread the word and reach new people and kind of share the facts about the TPP with more people. But I also think that that's kind of where all of us need to come in. If there's folks that you know that are concerned about climate change, try and have a face-to-face conversation with them to make sure that they understand how TPP would impact Canada's capacity to act on climate. You know, try and get different groups that are in your community involved and educated about the impacts. I think that really this is ultimately a people-powered movement, and it's going to take all of us working to try and kind of raise the alarm about the TPP before it's too late. And Fatine, I don't know if you were sort of stalled out there for a minute, but if you are back and there's anything you want to add, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think like because there is a lot of interest around the intersections of climate and the TPP. One of the recent reports that came out this fall is by the IATP, and it's called "The Climate Cost of Free Trade." So you can look that up if you want to learn a bit more. And the director for the IATP has talked about how trade deals are driving a form of corporate-led globalization that is highly extractive of natural resources and completely ignores the damage it does to the climate. So if we don't reform our trade agreements and reject the TPP, it'll be nearly impossible to reach our climate goals that we agreed to in Paris.
Thanks, Fatine. The next question comes from Rosaria, who emailed. And it's, who are our coalition partners? Jolan, could you take that to start, and then maybe Fatine, you can talk about some of the local organizing we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a bunch of groups that we've worked with on various things in the past. So when we were showing you pictures from some of the rallies we held outside the hearings, we were working with Open Media, Some of Us, Council of Canadians. I'm definitely forgetting people. We've done some work on, I don't know if you heard about the Toronto Rock Against the TPP concert. For that, we were helping out with, there was a bunch of folks from Labor that were participating, from Steelworkers and Unifor and CUPE, and I think others. For the day, sort of the day of action and the month of action that's planned for November, we're working with different groups taking the lead on different events, and then everybody trying to sort of support around getting members of different groups out to all the events. So we're kind of in the early stages of figuring out exactly who can commit to helping for November. We're talking to a lot of the groups that I just mentioned that we've worked with in the past, and we'll confirm the sort of final list of people who have signed on to be officially a part of it once we've got final sign off. But yeah, conversations with probably about 10 different national organizations from labor and civil society and different groups. That thing I think I'll say on that before I pitch to Fatine, we're very much like interested in connecting with groups that have concerns about the TPP, even if they haven't been involved in organizing before. So somebody actually just sent me a note to let me know that there's a group of doctors, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, that just wrote a letter opposing the TPP, and so I'm going to be interested in trying to connect with those folks to see if they're interested in helping out. So if there's people that we might not already be connected to who you think we should be, encourage you to send an email, and we'll do our best to get in contact with as big a coalition as possible, because that's really what we need at this stage is sort of a united front of opposition. Fatine, do you want to say anything about specific folks in Toronto that you're in contact with?
Yeah, so I think like some of the local groups that are already active in work around social justice, like MISSIN, which is the Mining and Justice Solidarity Network, or other groups that are working with like racialized communities, or particularly groups that are mobilizing around like mining in their own country. So like the Filipino like community is like very active in like doing resistance work against mining development in their own country. So like those are some of the groups that we're trying to target. But I think mainly what I want us to kind of do a refresh on is to look at where are the community places that are not engaging with TPP, and what are the kind of the key messages that we can use to kind of bring them into the conversation. I think the TPP is a very broad, it's broad enough that it affects a lot of folks in different ways. So I think it would be really cool for you to look at your community and to look at your neighborhood and to see if there are organizations that, you know, could really benefit from having this dialogue, and how you can bring that dialogue to them and bring them into the conversation about TPP.
Thanks a lot for that. And just a reminder, if you've got questions, you can email them to questions@Leadnow.ca or tweet us with the hashtag Reject TPP. The next question comes from David. He's asking, is Leadnow considering a charter challenge to the TPP? We've been involved in some legal challenges around FIPA, the kind of trying to FIPA before. Can I pitch that one to you, John?
Yeah, sure. So we've heard that a constitutional lawyer named Rocco Galati has just launched a constitutional challenge to CETA that's focusing on the investor-state dispute settlement, so like the mechanisms that allow corporations to sue governments. And so that's an interesting tactic that we've sort of just started thinking about. But at this stage, it feels like the priority has to be getting out into the streets and shifting the story around the TPP. Leadnow is unlikely to sort of take the lead on a legal strategy. We've worked on legal strategies in the past, but it's like our expertise and is around mobilizing people and building people power. We feel like that's got to be the priority right now, especially because it feels like, you know, this fall is a critical window when we could see a lot of pressure on the government to ratify the TPP. And so we want to be getting out in the streets as fast as we can. I think it's interesting to think about how constitutional challenge could play into the strategy. And I think that there probably are people that are thinking about that, similar to the constitutional challenge on CETA. I think that we would definitely consider adding support to a constitutional challenge if one comes forward and seems viable. It's something that we would consider, but at this stage, we can't do everything, and we're focusing on what we know how to do, which is getting people out in the streets.
Thanks, John. The next question comes from Joanne. She's saying, do you see any difference in strategy in this situation?
You just cut out there for a sec. I think it's about living in an NDP riding. Is that right?
Yeah, that was right.
Yeah, so I think that I can jump in, and Fatine, if you want to add anything, feel free. I think that there's a couple answers to that. I think if you live in a urban area where there's kind of a variety of ridings throughout, potentially working with people that live in like the next door riding that might be held by a Liberal, doing a petition delivery there is going to potentially be something that you might want to consider, because it does allow you to get the petition directly into the hands of somebody that's in the governing Liberal Party. But I think that, you know, there are lots of rural ridings where there's just one party for a huge area, and sometimes they're they could be an NDP or a Conservative MP. I think that all the parties need to hear from us on this, and so it's still important to be getting out in the streets no matter where you live. The other piece is that showing united opposition across the country is really going to demonstrate to the Liberals that that there's a huge movement coming together to oppose the TPP, and it'll help to make it a national media story. So I think that it's true that that a part of our idea is to try and put pressure on Liberal MPs, but really this is about demonstrating the strength of the movement, and that's important to do no matter where we live. And kind of the more people out in the streets, the better the chance we have to convince the government to say no to TPP.
Thanks very much, Jolan. Next question comes from Larry, who is asking, can you tell me why Leadnow has been vocal against the TPP but hasn't campaigned on CETA?
That's a pretty quick answer. It's basically a capacity issue. We have a very small staff team. We're funded by small donations from people like you, and we can't do as much as we'd like to be able to do. So you may see something on CETA from us in the next little bit, because it seems like it's entering a sort of key moment in that campaign. It's started to be derailed, and we need to sort of finish the job. But we've been focused more on TPP because it's something that we weren't able to do everything, and TPP felt like the place where we could have the biggest impact.
Okay, thanks, John. And next question, which I'll pitch to Fatin for. Why do all these trade deals have investor-state dispute clauses? The question saying, it seems to me that this just invites lawsuits from corporations.
Yeah, so I think that's, the bottom line is that, the TPP is not a trade deal. And I think that the ISDS clearly points to that. I think this is just an opportunity for multinational corporations to use this process in order to make sure that their profits and property rights are not affected. So and through this process, what would happen is that the court, through this process, they would be deciding whether or not this multinational corporation, for example, deserves compensation, if they were denied, let's say a mining permit to go into a country and do mining there, and the appeals process is also difficult. And when people are not able to access these spaces in order to challenge them, I think that's what they're trying to leverage. Is they're trying to bully anyone who would be a threat to any form of dissent or any form of resistance. So I think it's a really good question of understanding why they're using the ISDS, but it's been used since the 1960s to protect foreign investment from volatile governments in the global south as well. So this is not something that's new, but through this TPP, they're going to really ramp it up and use it a lot more.
Yeah,
maybe you can add some.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. It's just become a way for corporations to kind of control the playing field. What they'll say is, and I think what maybe the initial intent of ISDS was around kind of, so early investment into countries that were doing things like sort of suddenly nationalizing the rail or seizing property. The argument was that those kinds of unpredictable decisions made it hard for corporations to then invest capital into those markets. And so by creating this mechanism where they could settle those disputes if they did occur, it would make the marketplace more attractive to global capital. So that's kind of the argument, but the reality is that we're not seeing. It's not sort of I think it was intended as this kind of very special circumstances, only when something really extreme happens. you would use it. And you know, there's lawsuits happening all the time. Like, I don't even know how many Canada is facing right now, but there's like dozens of them. And it's no longer something that's about like, you know, preventing sort of extreme cases. It's something where it's like built into the business model of corporations that they know that if they can't make money by, you know, doing whatever their core business is, they can always, you know, sue the government for laws that are being passed. So we're really concerned about ISDS. That's one of the biggest problems that we have with trade deals like the TPP. And from our perspective, where it is now is it's basically just a corporate power grab.
The next question comes in via Twitter, and if anyone wants in, you can tweet them with the hashtag Reject TPP, or email them to questions@leadnow.ca. So the question is from Pat, and it's saying, how do we proper analysis of the problems with the TPP?
Matthew was just cutting out there. I don't know if you want to take this one, Fatina, as kind of how do we get mainstream media to do proper analysis of TPP?
Yeah, and I think, you know, like, again, I think the point of this campaign is that this is really going to be pushed by people and like us collectively showing to not only the government, but also to media institutions that this is an issue that needs to get on the national radar. And I think the reason that the mainstream media has been reluctant to report on it is that a lot of times like this information isn't accessible for people, and also because we are looking for sound bites in media, a lot of times it's difficult to like digest what the TPP is actually about in the first place, and then try to bring in relevant examples and stories that actually make people understand, okay, this is actually something that could affect me if I am a mom, if I'm an environmental activist, or if I am, you know, in the dairy industry, and like how my community could be affected. So I think that you are totally right. I think that we need to do a lot more in-depth analysis, but the way that will happen is by us starting to like share these stories, and kind of jump starting that conversation, because I think media is also lags a lot of times, even though a lot of times like the real news hits on like social media and Twitter, where you're like seeing things happen live, and then the media kind of is like, okay, what's going on? Where are the people at? And then follow up with like the more in-depth analysis.
Thanks, Teen. The next question is saying, remember.
Oh, Matthew, your internet seems to be unstable. So maybe I'll just read this one out. I think it's someone just mentioned that events are planned for November. Won't that be too late to do anything since it's signed before then? So we aren't expecting the TPP to be ratified in Canada before November. What we're expecting is that that kind of the period this fall and potentially into early next year is going to be the moment when the government's going to be kind of making up their mind and potentially moving closer to ratification. And so we see it as our window to influence the decision. It won't be too late to influence their decision on whether or not they ratify. It's kind of like the key moment when we need to get out in the streets. We don't know a fixed timeline. The government has until 2018 to make a final ratification decision. We think that they're going to probably try and do it sooner, but it's unlikely. Part of the reason that we don't expect a ratification before November, just for context, is that the committee that's been doing the cross-country consultations hasn't even submitted their report yet to Parliament, and the earliest that could happen is December. So we don't think that the government's going to make any decision until that report is tabled in Parliament, and the earliest that could happen is December, but they will be kind of like internally deciding which side they're going to come down on, and so that's why this fall is a key moment to kind of mobilize opposition. I'm just noticing also time, we're about 4 minutes over, so I don't know, maybe we can do one more, and then if there's other questions, we can try and follow up with folks by email.
If you can hear me.
You are choppy, choppy, choppy. Okay, so Matthew seems to be chopping out, but I'll just take one more, and then if other folks have questions, we'll check that questions at Leadnow inbox and try and follow up with any questions that are still outstanding. Someone is asking. So this question is from, oh, I don't actually have a name. What source document would you recommend for preparing flyers and or articles in local media? So if you sign up for the petition delivery action, which I hope you do, we're going to be sending you a bunch of resources, including templates for what you could send to local media to get them to come out and cover your event, and templates for posters and flyers. So all of that will be stuff that we can provide for you, and then you can just customize it for your local context. So that's pretty straightforward. If you're looking for kind of more in-depth information, I'd recommend our Reject TPP.ca website. It has links to articles on all the different aspects of the TPP, and so it's a great place to get information. Okay, well, thank you very much for being with us on this online hangout and bearing with our tech challenges. It's going to be really exciting to work with you all over the next few months to shift the conversation on the TPP, and yeah, inspiring to see so many people interested in scaling up this campaign. Anyone want to say anything else before we end this? Say goodbye. All right.
Yeah, maybe I just want to thank everyone for coming and joining us for the hour, and I'm like really excited about this campaign. Just joining the Leadnow team and seeing how engaged the Leadnow community is and how fast everyone is able to like mobilize and get together is really actually quite inspiring to see. I'm really excited to let Trudeau know clearly that we are against the TPP deal.
Awesome. And Britt just sent me a message to say she's going to be checking through the questions at Leadnow.ca email inbox to answer any outstanding questions. So thanks for doing that, Britt. And sorry that you weren't able to join this because of the tech challenges. Anyways, you'll be hearing from us, like I said, tomorrow with a link for where you can sign up to host a local action for the Reject TPP petition deliveries, and really look forward to working with you to scale this campaign up. Thanks, everybody. Bye.